5:24. I will call this meeting of the Public Health and Safety Committee to order. Our first item will be to do a roll call. Lisa Rasmussen.
Here.
Dawn Herbst.
Here.
Becky McElhaney.
Here.
Pat Peckham.
Here.
Jim Wadinsky.
Here.
All members are present, and we do have a quorum. We will now move on to the first agenda item, which is to select a chairperson for the committee. I will open it up to nominations. Alder Herbst.
I would like to nominate Lisa Rasmussen.
With pleasure, I would second that.
Are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations? Seeing none, I will close nominations. Lisa Rasmussen is our only nominee. Do I have a motion to accept that?
You just cast a unanimous ballot.
Cast a unanimous ballot.
Okay.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, motion passes. I will now hand over the meeting to Lisa.
Thank you. The second half of the first item of business on our agenda is to select a vice chair for this committee. I'll open up nominations for the vice chair.
I nominate Dawn Herbst.
Okay, we have a nomination for Dawn Herbst. Is there a second for Dawn's nomination?
I would second that.
Second from Peckham. Additional nominations?
Is Herbst would accept that nomination?
She's willing? Okay. I suppose that's an important thing to check.
Just checking.
Okay. Any additional nominations? If not, then the committee would cast a unanimous ballot for Dawn Herbst as vice chair of the committee. Members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None are opposed, so congratulations, Ms. Herbst. All right. Item number 2 is the minutes of our previous meeting from 4/20 of 2020, and copies of the minutes were in the packets. Any revisions or corrections to the minutes necessary? If not, a motion to approve the minutes would be in order.
I would so move.
Motion by Peckham. Is there a second? Second by McElhaney. Further discussion or questions? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None are opposed. The minutes are approved. Item number 3 is to consider approval or denial of various license applications, including renewals of establishment liquor licenses for the 20 to 21 license year. As you know, all establishment licenses come up for renewal on July 1st. And so we received a note from the clerk's office with our packets indicating that there's still some background checking to be done on some of the server license applicants. And so the request from the clerk's office is that you would, there are no denials recommended yet, but that you would approve the licenses contingent upon the background check that's being conducted. And if something would be found that would necessitate a denial, we'd get those back. So do we have a motion then to accept or deny licenses as recommended by staff contingent upon background checks?
So moved.
Motion by McElhaney. Is there a second?
I will second.
Second by Herbst. Further discussion or questions? The only thing I will bring up under this item with the license renewals is, you'll recall a few months ago, we had held off establishment warnings to a few license holders, and we will be entertaining those license holders in the month of June. That's Rock's Place, Nooch's Eatery, and M&R Station. And, with that, we've also got another one that's at 100 points this month, and that's Hutch's. And so we should probably invite him too. And the expectation with those licenses is the establishment expects that the license will be renewed unless a non-renewal or revocation process is undertaken. And so it's not just to assume that we're going to talk to them or talk about them in June and that they may not renew. That's a totally different process. But right now, we'll have them in June for a formal expression of concern based upon the events that brought them to the demerit totals that they have today. So this obviously recommends that all of them pass for renewal. But if there's continued issues at the establishment, any suspension, revocation, any of that activity is a completely separate deal. So I just wanted to be clear on that.
Is Chair, you want to handle all 4 of them or maybe only 3? They do take some time.
I think with a formal expression of concern, we can get them all in June.
Very good.
Because I think with the commencement of the new year, we want them all to be clear on our expectations, and there's been some pretty serious issues.
Very
So
good.
we'll do our best, though, to keep that on track. And then also space out all the people that are coming. Okay, so with that, we have a motion on the floor then to accept or deny licenses as recommended, contingent upon background checking. Further comments? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? None are opposed, so that motion carries. Item number 4 is to consider an amendment to premise to include outdoor seating and alcohol service area for Whitewater Music Hall. You've got a plan in your packets that was submitted by the premises owner with a map of an outdoor area that they'd like to set up in their south parking lot. They've got the luxury of some natural boundaries in their south parking lot that should enable them to control the area well. We do have the owners of Whitewater with us tonight, if you have questions for them. Does anybody have questions for Kelly or Leslie from Whitewater about the proposal? I did ask them if they intend to have outdoor music in the area. They are looking for outdoor music in the area, low-key, not super amplified. There's no immediate neighbors, but that would be a separate permit that we would need to make sure we get to them for that outdoor music as well. Any questions on the plan or the diagram that's been submitted? If not, is there a motion to approve the outdoor area?
I would move to approve it. It looks like a well-thought-out plan, and as you mentioned, they do have a luxury of the location there that kind of lends itself to that. And so, give it a go.
Okay. We have a motion by Peckham. Is there a second? Second by Herbst. Further discussion or questions? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? None are opposed. That motion carries as well. Let's see. Item number 5 is discussion and possible action to repeal and replace subsections A and B of section 15.24.010 boundaries. And in your packets, you'll see that we have this downtown fire district that we've had for a long time, and it really governs properties that are sharing walls or that are constructed in close proximity so that fire can hop from one building to another rather easily. Bill Hebert is in with us tonight. He's looking for an amendment to that to exempt a couple of buildings that are not set up that way. They're in the confines of the district, but they are not in a position like many of them are on 3rd Street and on 4th Street in the core of the downtown. And so you'll see on the map the proposed exemptions, which would redraw that boundary. And that then allows more standard construction practices to be used as well in reconstruction or in remodeling of those structures that would be, they're green on the map. Bill, do you have anything to offer to the committee in connection with the fire district?
Sure, I'd just like to add that we met with the fire department and discussed the rationale to these areas. Primarily, the biggest one was on the west side with the old Rainbow Laundry site. We have a proposal that'll be coming later this summer that with the modern building codes it'll be sufficient to be, it'll be safe. It'll be sprinklered, it'll have access on all 4 sides of the building. So the fire district requirements are a little above and beyond what are necessary to have a safe building in Wausau. So we looked at the west side and pared that down quite a bit, primarily because the lands are either vacant or buildings are freestanding, not with 0 lot line concerns. So that was the west side. And then on the east side, we looked at the vacant land by the St. James School and the parcels that are currently parking lots north of Dudley Tower. So modern building codes are going to require safe construction, fire sprinkler systems, et cetera. So this is our request.
Okay. Does anyone have questions for Bill about the amendment? If not, is there a motion to approve the amendment? Motion by McElhaney, is there a second? Second by Peckham. Further discussion? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? None are opposed, that motion carries. Item number 6 is discussion and possible action on expanding outdoor food and alcohol service and seating options for a temporarily and expressly limited time period as a result of COVID-19 pandemic upon relaxation or cessation of the governor's safer at home order, including possible amendments to ordinances related to sidewalk cafe permits, standards, and requirements, consumption or possession of intoxicants on streets and in the 400 block, and possible use of all or a portion of the 400 block and/or 400 block patio for outdoor food and alcohol service by restaurants. And so this started because we received a request from some businesses and their property manager in the 300 and 400 block of 3rd Street, but realizing that many establishments are all suffering from the same fate, the Assistant City Attorney and I began to look at this to see if there's something that we can do citywide to help restaurants and establishments that need additional outdoor seating, accommodate that outdoor seating by perhaps expanding in ways that, they would not have had to in the absence of the pandemic. So we have a lot to talk about tonight. First, we need to figure out what we can do and what we absolutely can't do. And we have to figure out what is in line with state law and what is in line with municipal ordinance, because municipal ordinance we can work with. And so if we needed to make temporary adjustments to those municipal ordinances that govern those areas, including parking and events and that type of stuff, we can. If we are locked in under the confines of the Class B license, that's a little bit different. And so that's what we have to talk ourselves through tonight. And so you received some information from the Assistant City Attorney with some options. And so we've got a few options to consider. And, I guess, why don't we start off, why don't we hear from, I guess Mark Craig's here with us, he stopped in. If you want to come up, Mark, and talk to us a little bit about your plan that you had submitted, and we can talk through some of that.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm Mark Craig with Compass Properties, and, knowing that there's going to be some real restrictions on our restaurants as they reopen in terms of capacity and seating and wanting to practice good social distancing, we want to do what we can to extend those boundaries for seats outside the doors of the physical premises. And so looking at cafe seating and how we can take the sidewalks and utilize more tables and chairs directly in front of the building and possibly in the neighboring sites if they're non-restaurant and the neighbor's okay with it. That's what we're looking to do. Also, in the 300 block, there's some restrictions. When we converted from a pedestrian mall to a street, we had a lot of 4-foot bollards. And those bollards restrict the ability to put tables and chairs between the planters where they could and should be. And so I'd be looking for the city to help us possibly remove some of those so that we can put more tables and chairs out on both sides of the 300 block. The 300 block is somewhat unique because we have chow, jalapenos, lemongrass, and Politos, 4 restaurants in a 1-block area, which is the only block in the city, I think, that has that, and with limited parking. So the thought was, in talking to Tyler from Malarkey in the 400 block and Joe from the Mint, could we also do some things there that they could utilize the patio area over in front of the 400 block and serve across the street? And I realize there's restrictions, talking to Tara, on how we serve alcohol in those areas, but possibly we can work through that. I know the number of cities throughout the state are looking at dining in the street options, sidewalk, alcohol and food service. And I know Brady Street is doing some things, Milwaukee's looking at doing some things. Blake sent out a letter today pointing out that a number of other municipalities in the state are looking at this. Hopefully, we can get the legislature to make some adjustments more broadly for the state, because I don't think that this is going to be a one-season issue. I think this is going to be long-term to help our restaurants survive what's been one of the most traumatic business scenarios you can imagine. So everything we can do to help them build their businesses, make people feel safe to come to those locations by sitting outside, we want to do. The other thought was to do, since there's no concerts on the square this year, could we do dining in the street on Wednesday nights? Not a Friday night or a Saturday night when these restaurants may already be busy or have carry-out, but can we do that? And what restrictions are there to do that? And we'd love to do that in the 300 and 400 block. And one last thing is curbside pickup and delivery is going to be important going forward for as long as we can see, right? And in the 300 block, we have two 15-minute stalls, one on the south end in front of Chow, one at the north end in front of HT Cobley. I would love to group 3 of them in front of Chow. We eliminate the one on the north end. By having 3 together is more impactful as people drive around trying to pick up their meals, delivery services going in to pick up meals. Once activity starts rebounding and people are coming back down again, those parking stalls are going to be really important for these businesses. And can we do that? And one last point is parklets. I know Milwaukee's looking at parklets. I think you may have seen a pack that I sent to Tara today. Those are ideas that we have to think out of the box. And given the fact that we have such a short season to take advantage of it in our climate, perhaps 100 days, making a timely decision that these businesses can start to ramp up. We can help them with tables and chairs and some of the items they need. We want to do all those things, but first we need to find out what we can do, what you'll allow us to do that we can do safely and legally. And I thank you for the consideration.
Okay, thank you for coming in. Okay, so let's kind of unpack it, I guess, one request at a time. The first is to remove some bollards in an attempt to accommodate what is really the expansion of their sidewalk cafes. Most of the businesses operating along that area already have sidewalk cafe permits. The ones that don't are certainly welcome to apply. Assuming that the neighbor is, not a, well, and even if they are a competing facility, they probably want it too, but where do we fit, committee, on allowing expansion of those sidewalk cafes? I think that's just a matter of delineating where the sidewalk cafe is and allowing those expansions to occur. Mr. Peckham?
Yeah, do we know anything about the bollards and how they're removed, or are those like plastic covers that you lift off and unbolt the thing? Ms. Mayor, you know?
Go ahead, Mayor.
Sure. So we went on a small tour last week. So shout out Mark Craig and team for doing this. And we looked at them. Apparently DPW is able to remove them pretty easily.
Okay.
But then they'll put some type of cover over it so you could have a table. So it should be, it's easily doable from what I understand.
Very good.
I can't do it, but they can.
Okay. So if we can remove and store those, go ahead, Jim.
What's the initial purpose of those when they were installed? Typically, a bollard is something that is used for safety, something that is there to help save the pedestrian from a possible vehicle that's out of control, and will that affect that purpose?
Go ahead, Mayor.
Sure. I asked the same question because I was like, oh, is this for keeping cars from crashing into people? Apparently it's a feature left over from when it was the pedestrian mall, so it's more decorative than anything. That's what I'm led to understand.
Okay. And that direction, I mean, that's basically landscaping. I mean, that's direction that we could, we can improve that. I think the expansion of the sidewalk cafe permit, as far as where they're expanding to and what the new area looks like, they could work out, the applicants could work out the dimensions of that and what that map looks like through their application. Is that correct, Mary? So they would just apply with an increased size area and seek approval for a larger area with more tables. And the same rules would apply. They have to maintain control of it. They have to be able to easily move them in an emergency. But that seems to be the least of it, really, is just to allow a few more tables. Right, across the street is a totally different unpack. But on the same side in front of their place, that should be an easy change we can accommodate. Are we kind of agreeing by consensus that we want the clerk's office to work with the sidewalk cafe permit holders to expand those territories?
It would be fine, I think.
Okay. You think do we need voting action on that to approve those, Tara, or do you think we should just agree by consensus? That's a
Well,
street-wide modification.
I think Barrett can probably just take those down on his own. But having Mary, I think, work
To determine who's got what space, I think,
Right.
is, because then you know whose people are supposed to be in control of it.
I don't think you really need formal action.
Okay. Okay. All right, why don't we do that? Why don't we just vote so we've got a record? Do we have a motion then to allow Sidewalk Cafe permit holders to request expansion of their Sidewalk Cafe area by working out a amended arrangement through the clerk's office in connection with the permit renewal?
And
Those all
that-
renew anyway,
And
soon
that
here.
may include the removal of a bollard.
Correct.
Yes, I would move.
Okay, we have that motion by Peckham. Is there a second?
I will second it.
Second by Herbst. Further discussion or questions? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? None are opposed, so that we can accommodate. We've got that handled. Yes,
One thing, Mary, are those sidewalk cafe permits approved by the committee and council?
Yeah.
So do you want to also consider amending or making a temporary sunset provision to our ordinance where you delegate that to
Yes.
staff so that Mary can just do those
Yes.
without coming back?
so, and I guess in connection with that last motion, do we want to also then approve that those area increases can be staff-approved and delegate that authority to the clerk's office to approve those if the criteria are met? No, are we in agreement, though, that we would?
I'm gonna have to do some kind of amendment to the ordinance for the sidewalk cafes allowing that delegation, and we've done this in the past where you just give me direction to do that, and then I'll send it forward to the council
Yes.
as approved by you all if you approve it. But
Yes.
that would have to be, and we can have it sunset, why don't we decide now, does it sunset,
Let's,
October 1st or November 1st, in
Right.
case we have a nice
well, I think we should
October.
manage it season by season, because we don't know where we're going to be in 2021. So is there consensus among the committee that we would allow it until November 1st, when assuming the weather turns November 1st, if we have a decent fall, they'd still want to be out there? And then next season, if there's still a need, we could certainly consider it again. But we'll get through this year first, which is where the largest impact has already happened. So, sure. Why don't we make a motion to direct the Assistant City Attorney to make the appropriate modifications to that sidewalk cafe ordinance to recognize a short-term adjustment, the authority which is delegated to the clerk's office.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, so we have a motion by McElhaney. Is there a second?
I will second that.
Second by Herbst. Further discussion or questions? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None are opposed. So then we'll direct Tara to make the related amendments, and that'll speed up the process because it won't all have to come back through here case by case. Okay. Let's talk about next, the 400 Block Patio. That was the next item that I had made a note about. Obviously, a few establishments that operate adjacent to the 400 Block Patio would like to use it as an expanded seating area. First, we have to see where we are at with the description of premises. If we can make a temporary amendment to the premises description to include such an area, and we also have to look at the issue of fairness. That's a public space, and it's a public right-of-way. Are there other establishments that may also like to use that space? And, how would that be viewed? If we assign that public space to two businesses, are there two or three others that may want to share that space? So that we should maybe look at maybe a little wider use there. Mayor, go ahead.
I also wanted to note that there are reservations for the 400 block. I don't know how that affects the patio, but it might be something to consider.
We have Jamie. Jamie, come on up and talk to us about what's happening on the block. I know Wausau Events canceled theirs, but if there's other events that this might disrupt, can you talk about that?
Sure, thank you, members of the committee. I did check our schedule today, and there is still a concert on the Square schedule for June 28th, and then another one in August, as well as we have another event from DC Everest Community Ed, which is still on the books. They're deciding whether they're going to have it. And then there's one other one that I can't recall what it is. So we do have 4 pretty big reservations right now that are still on the books. We had only canceled everything through the end of June, and then after that, it was really up to the organizations to keep. The other thing with the the patio, just whatever direction we have. Typically, we have tables out there that we provide to the community. I had originally been told not to put those tables out based on the stay-at-home order. I was advised on Friday from our health department that I could put the tables back out as long as we space them 6 feet or more apart. So that would mean that not all of them would go out, but the majority of them could. I can wait on putting those out based on what your discussion is with the patio, but I did want to let you know that we do have those couple of reservations still for the park itself. And my direction from the health department as of right now is that we can continue to go ahead with rentals of our facilities with the direction to those rentals that we are recommending they follow the guidelines set forth in that order number 1 by our health department. And then we are asked as staff, as well as we are going to reach out to the Wausau PD's CSOs and our sheriff's deputies to just monitor what those special events look like and see if we're having some major problems with social distancing and just other issues that the health department deems necessary to stop rentals, then we can do that. But right now, we've been told we can go ahead and just pass out those recommendations.
There is some interest in the community, obviously, for people who are not comfortable sitting inside of a restaurant yet, and if sidewalk cafe space is filled, still either doing carryout and having a place downtown where they can walk and sit outside and eat what they've purchased. I guess I have a little bit of a concern about what the optics are of a public space, which that's a public right-of-way adjacent to a public park, and to assign that space to the sole use of a couple of private businesses. Because what happens then is, what happens when someone purchases a meal from another restaurant, lemongrass, chow, whatever, they carry it down there, they want to sit and have that meal in that public space, where they're then approached by the employees of a business across the street and said, wait a minute, you can't sit here, this is our space. That's a public space that taxpayers have paid for. And so I think we have to be careful with making assignments to assign it to just one business. I think I have no problem with, people who purchase carry-away food or carry-away beverage, for that matter, because they can sell closed containers in, like the picnic concept from any of those businesses. And I think all of those businesses may appreciate the ability to have their people carry away and sit in a space like that, even if we add tables to the 400 block more widely, down in the block, if there's not events happening, if those organizers decide to cancel, that space really should be available for the use of all still. I guess the sidewalk's different, but this terrace thing is maybe a sore spot. I guess, what are your thoughts? Pat, go ahead.
Yeah, I was wondering if the request to use that space, specifically the nearest one would be the Mint and Townies, if that's for 1 day a week, 2 day a week, 7 days a week, and whether the tables would be owned by those businesses and directed to be placed nearer the street rather than on the park side of that patio.
Well, and that's the other thing we have to watch too, is where they get placed, because the street's still functioning, assuming that the street is still running.
Yeah.
We have to watch where we sit people too. But, so we have the owner of Townies is with us, as well as Mr. Craig. Tyler, would you come up and talk a little bit about what you envision that space to look like if you were allowed to use it?
So honestly, when we were talking about this as a group, kind of ad hoc before we got into here, we're just trying to figure out a way to expand tables outside the restaurants. The first part of your discussion already did that. So this is just kind of additional to that. I really like the ideas of adding more picnic tables from other places and just increasing a social space that anyone could use for any reason. They could bring a picnic from home. Using the 400 block and keeping the tables far enough apart where people can enjoy part of a summer. Honestly, even having a reservation system for the table where people know they could meet and use it for whatever purpose they want that is outside of a restaurant-specific ownership. Like, I'm not looking to expand specifically there. I just think it would be great to use the 400 block on whatever basis we could and make people feel safe. There's no reason why a food truck still couldn't come on 4th Street and take advantage of some of those tables and those businesses that don't, there's a lot to protect here. I really think it's already the way you're breaking it apart and unpacking it is super fair. taking away Mark's, we had a different name for those things, but taking those off the street is going to help them out on Third Street. And then creating a social space for some of those other businesses that don't have a street to expand into is great. So, I mean, personally, I think our needs are met. I feel like this is a great discussion. One side note, I might say, I spoke to a couple of my friends that just own taverns, and they were asking if there could be some kind of, if they could put a few tables outside and follow some of the same regulations as we allow our restaurants. This is not from, I mean, we can already do that at my business. I'm just speaking for them because they had other obligations. Understanding that they would have to be in by 9 o'clock at night, just like the restaurants, but they're trying to keep their patronage up, but keep their density down. They would appreciate those same sort of options where they would work out. And traditionally, we don't do that for pubs. I'm not specifically here advocating for them. I just thought I'd point that out because
We've allowed some to have outdoor areas. I mean, some have outdoor areas. Hiawatha's got one. I think, I mean, we have allowed them on a case-by-case basis. I think they have to be able to control it. It's got to have either some, either fenced or natural boundary, and then it has to, much like outdoor seating, if there's going to be music in it, we'd have those considerations. So I think we certainly could consider that for them case by case.
Yeah,
If they want an outdoor service area, if they come forward with a good plan, we've always allowed for that, but they certainly would be allowed to apply for that
Well-
type of outdoor service.
Okay, well, I think Hiawatha is a restaurant, but I'm not sure taverns have been able to that don't have food. Lopnows or intermission, things like that, where they just want to dot their perimeter, keep their sidewalks open, just give a place people to sit down and have a cocktail. Same rules where it has table service, they can't just have a party out there on the sidewalk. I think we're just looking for a responsible way to move forward. And honestly, if this is something that comes in waves, we need something to fall back on, something we can plan to do.
Right.
I know that it's early, and I know none of us know anything really of what's coming. These are all just, they're all just thoughts.
I think that's
you know.
discussion that we could certainly have with pubs, just like we have it for special events that they have periodically where, like B&R, they have an event in their parking lot every year, we allow it.
Right.
Cabarets had one. And so if it was something that was on a, semi-standing basis to get through this summer and maybe the fall, we'd have to take a look at what's going to happen out there, what the hours of it would be, what the impact of the neighbors might be if it's allowed.
Exactly. That's
But
why I think you should mirror it on
think
the
we
ones
should
from the restaurant. that
Certainly
have
talk
those
about
rules.
that, definitely. Maybe we'd have more limited hours outside than inside or something, but I think that's a conversation that our committee would be willing to have.
Yeah, I mean, I just kind of came here to tell you that too,
But yeah.
I mean, we were
If you're-
here
If
just.
you're not looking, though, for specific use of the 400 Block Terrace for the Mint and for Townies, and you're willing to have a more holistic approach to just adding more seating for
Of course.
everybody in all restaurants
It's a
down
city
there?
park, yeah.
I thought we would be more fair if we look at it from a River District approach, because there's probably a half dozen other businesses in the River District that would like that same opportunity to be able to sell somebody maybe a boxed dinner and a, bucket of sealed beverages that they take over there, just like they did for concert night, and, consume that and move on. And then that space opens up for someone else, perhaps with a meal from someplace else.
Absolutely.
Yep, go ahead, Mark.
Just one comment on that, and I know Jamie's here tonight, but what about adding picnic tables to the 400 block? And what about using all the tables and chairs, but spreading them beyond the patio down onto the grass? I just think that's where we should be thinking about and creating that space, like Tyler's saying, where everyone can gather and
Right.
get together. And since there's going to be limited use of that 400 block this summer, maybe this is the
Right.
time to try that.
Well, and that's stuff that could be either moved around or removed depending on whether an event goes forward that either needs it or doesn't need it. I guess, Jamie, what are your thoughts on adding a few tables in the block proper that are easily movable if you'd have to get them out for an event?
I think we can look at that. We have plenty of tables that we move around for other events. Plus, like Mr. Craig said, we're not using all of I think we have 15 normally down there. We probably can put out 10, so we'd have 5 extra. So I can look at that. I just got to look at those couple events, but even if we moved them to the side, most of them are public events where people come and sit anyway and bring their own chairs, so this would give them
Sure.
some space. The only thing we'd have to look at with, and I think maybe you're getting to it with the park ordinance, is the alcohol consumption right now as after 4 PM. So if that were to change, that would be I'm sure you've looked at that already, so.
most of the use for that type of purpose seems like it occurs after 4 PM already. I don't know that there's a heavy lunch rush that's going to have that beverage, and that 4 PM, that 4 PM, right? That 4 PM threshold was enacted for a reason, and it worked. And so I hate to get away from the 4 PM, but, 4 PM for anybody, and that includes people who are bringing their own picnic from home, just like they did on Wednesday night before the concert stopped. They'd still have that ability. If they want to show up with their own lawn chairs and have their own little space and have their little family thing away from the others, we certainly wouldn't stop that. But I think just putting a few more tables out there would have people in small groups have a place to sit and enjoy, whatever they've purchased from downtown, even if it's a food truck. We don't normally in public health and safety tell parks how to run parks, but I think that we could informally make a request of Jamie that she would look at adding those tables right away. And so that people could use those, and we wouldn't have to direct her or vote on that. I guess Jamie's amenable to that? And, sure.
I was thinking about this. I'll work with our staff to do it. The only thing I'm thinking about right now is when we mow the grass, just what that time will take to move the tables out of the way and then mow around it, or how we would whack it, but it's a logistic. Yeah, we could put it on the sidewalks too, as long as
Could
they're
do
out
that
of the
too,
way,
because
so
if the
we'll
block
figure it
isn't
out.
heavily programmed, I think we could work something out, so. Okay. Committee members, anything else to add to that part as far as the picnic space on the 400 block? If not, we'll try to unpack the rest of this. The other part of the request is Wednesday night in-street dining. And Wednesday night in-street dining, I think I've given this some thought, and I think we could accomplish that under the auspices of an event, perhaps managed by the River District, just like Concerts on the Square was, or like we had talked at one time before the pandemic about a Cinco de Mayo event. We had talked about, we've closed 3rd Street and 4th Street before. We close 4th Street every week for the concert for 4 or 5 hours, and then we reopen it again. This same thing, if they wanted an event that occurred every Wednesday from, June 15th to October 15th or whatever, I think that they could submit an event request for that. They could request the street closure. We would approve the street closure, and, then that then stops other people from parking there and getting stuck in there. I mean, obviously, the parking in the spaces is precluded during the event, so you would close it at a consistent time and reopen it at a consistent time, so people wouldn't show up to pick up a carryout and get caught in there. I mean, it would have to be properly signed by DPW. There'd have to be some horses brought down there that they could use to block it off at the proper time, just like they did with 4th Street. Wausau Events would go out and block off 4th Street every Wednesday at 3:30, and everyone knew what to expect. And, they made sure people's vehicles were out of there before they did it. I think this would have to be something similar. Go ahead, Mayor.
I just want to clarify, or I have a question about this. One of the things that the local businesses want is to be able to sell their alcohol, and this specific instance would not actually allow them to do that, right? The River District would need to hire bartenders and sell it in that way. I just want to be clear if this would help them or not.
When we did our walking tour, I was telling you, I was still trying to research
Oh, sure.
whether we could and how we might be able to do this. And it is, I believe it would be possible, and some of it's going to fall on the clerk's office, but to temporarily amend the premises on those, to that specific time and date for that period, in order to allow them to expand their premises into that street area when it's closed. I would want to do that through some kind of process where the owners of the bars who are or restaurants are asking to do that, where they have to sign, first they have to do an application to amend their premises temporarily, specifying that time. They would have to designate what area in the streets will be assigned to that restaurant. And then I would want them to sign a consent that says in advance that this is for this period, for this time, and when it's over, they agree their premises are going to revert back to what they were.
To the confines of their own building or whatever.
Right.
So let's just say that we would
Awesome.
look at first, the event permit is what closes the street. So once we have the street closed, which is kind of the easy part, The alcohol part, if we did a temporary premises amendment, assuming that any of the adjacent businesses were interested in participating, each of them would, through their operations plan that they submit for their July renewal, basically, there's a plan of
Right.
operation where they tell you where the stuff is stored and how they operate. In there, they could note that every Wednesday, say from 4 to 9 or whatever, that they're seeking this expansion into either the, first 8 spaces of X
And
Street
can-
or whatever, Third
And see,
Street.
that's where it might help to have an ordinance, a temporary ordinance, because, you'd want to put on the condition where a special event has been approved, where the street has been authorized to be closed, that they won't, we're going to have to allow some kind of, I don't know if Ben is out there on the phone.
He's on the call.
Or the fire department, what do we do about access for emergency
Emergency.
vehicles, something.
Sure, come on up,
But it
Bob.
is possible to do it.
That was my thought, and if we confined it to Third Street during that time, and we kept Jefferson, Washington, and Fourth all open, so we'd have access.
And Lisa, the other thing too is municipalities have to act rationally and reasonably when they implement rules and restrictions.
Right.
And so I'm not really clear where the line is drawn for this in the street thing. I mean, how do you exclude the 500 block where maybe there are a couple other establishments like Way Back When or Downtown Grocery that might want to participate in this? I also don't know what we do about, I don't know any
That's
other,
something that
I
we
want to
should-
be a little careful about.
That's something we should look at, because in the 600 block, we also have licensed establishments that may be interested. Now, when you think about Festival of Arts, Third Street is closed the entire length. And so we have that blocked off so that traffic then either operates on, Second, Fourth, or Fifth, depending on, Scott Street's not closed. Jefferson Street's not closed, Washington Street's not closed, depending on the circumstances of the event. Could we work something like that? I mean, now the River District, if you wanted to include the entire River District that includes those restaurants, you would do it from the 300 block to the 600 block, and then you would, basically come all the way up to Grant Street. It's one block. How would you view something like that, Bob?
So I spoke with our Fire Marshal Dave DeSantis on this subject before this meeting tonight, and actually Chief Kajal was on the online call and is able to answer questions on this. And our main concern is, of course, access in lieu of an emergency in any of those blocks, no matter where it's at. And so when we talk about occupation of a street for a venue, a party, the eating and drinking in the street, stuff like that, we need to define that. We have to have a clear fire lane.
Okay.
We are absolutely comfortable as long as they've got their tables and chairs in the areas of parking that's occurring now, and leaving the main thoroughfare clear to only pedestrian traffic. As we come in to respond to an emergency, we will move. It's got to be a simple barricade that can be moved by a single person.
Okay.
Firefighter will move the barricade and we'll enter that street to handle that emergency. So we don't see it as a hurdle as long as they can comply with that. We can't have tables and chairs all the way across the street and and blocking that fire lane. So if you would picture like the 300 block where lemongrass is there, if we have a fire at that, we have to make, we've already got very restricted access in that
Sure.
neighborhood. And so we can't restrict it any further, but we don't see really any change from having cars parked in that parking stalls to having table and chairs. And then asking people, of course, of emergency, we've got to evacuate it. And I don't see any hurdles that would prevent us from allowing such a thing.
So let's just talk this through out loud a little bit too with our organizers and our Third Street business folks. Let's just say that on those Wednesday nights for that 4-hour period or whatever it is, that from an appearance standpoint, those blocks would kind of look like a pedestrian mall again, where you'd have foot traffic and tables. And so for ease of emergency access, let's say all of the parking spaces became table space, and the access to the tables and people's, maneuvering around that area would be the normal travel lanes that cars drive in. Would that work for what you guys are trying to accomplish?
I think it's very doable. We did meet with Chief Blevin on Friday, and we were downtown and talked about all these items. And he said, given the distance that we're talking about for an ambulance that already pulls up in front of the mall, it's not much of a distance to pull a gurney down the street, and bringing a fire truck through. I don't know, if I saw a fire truck coming and we're at a table and chair, we'd pick it up and
You'd
move
move,
it.
right?
We'd
Yeah.
all move it.
Yeah.
So I would prefer we use the whole street. It makes it far more effective and fun. But if those are the restrictions, we'll live with them.
Okay. I feel like we're a little safer if we delineate where people sit versus where people come and go. Partly because if you use the entire street, people who are walking to and from their area are passing, I mean, if we're going to look at proper distancing, they're coming awful close to the people that are sitting eating. So maybe you want your people sitting and eating over there, and you want your people coming and going a little further away from them and not walking in amongst them all. I mean, that just, to minimize contact too, that might be a better flow.
Yeah, and it was, and I apologize for, I'm trying to repeat what our conversation with the fire marshal is, because he's the authority on it and has the right to dedicate what's going to be a fire lane and emergency access to any place of business in this community, and, well, in any community for that, not the local fire marshal is the authority. And that is a subject that we're unmovable on. We can't have reliant on people moving tables and chairs in an evacuation type status.
Sure.
Our concern is, in EMS is, of course, we've got a single unit down there, maybe there's multiple units. But a fire in a restaurant, on a primetime day, this stuff does occur, doesn't occur frequently, but we've got it prepared for that.
Well, it's happened. I mean, look how fast downtown grocery went up.
Yeah, we need to have a fire lane, and that's all.
Sure.
We're not looking to get in anybody's way here, but we need a fire lane
Okay.
access.
But if they would have tables in the parking stalls, that's okay.
Yeah, that was,
Okay.
the conversation with Dave DeSantis was that this has been done in the past, he
It has.
felt. And as long as they were doing it in similar circumstances, what they've done in the past, he's absolutely fine with it.
Okay. All right, Tyler.
I like that, to leave the fire lane open. I think that's totally reasonable. Another thing about establishing walking patterns is you may see some of the retailers decide to stay open too, since they know where they can market whatever it is they're trying to sell, and that would help them out too. And we're not, because they're going to lose parking for a couple hours while we're shutting that street down. If we can give them a reason to be excited about that, that would be excellent. That's a good
Well,
compromise.
maybe, and just from a distancing standpoint, people might be a little more comfortable if they're eating at a table and people they don't know aren't walking right
Just
past them
weaving.
and right behind
Yeah,
them.
yeah, I'm into that.
So a little more orderly space.
With the way that we were talking about being able to sell on the streets and the parameters and how to define that, I know that Bastille Days down in Milwaukee does something similar to what we're talking about every year. So there might be some kind of structure already in place of how they're defining their process, whatever you said, temporarily changing.
Temporary premises adjustment.
Yeah, there's I've been to places like maybe.
I've talked to Milwaukee today, and I do have some applications for them, but I don't know if we have amendments or.
We could give her the walking mic if the battery works in it.
The one thing too, though, while we're still talking about this, is Tyler had brought up, the taverns, and while we're here and we're all in the meeting, is this something that we're only going to apply to restaurants? And not the sort of taverns that don't have parking lots, the whole ones, I don't go to many bars, but I know there's those whole strip down Third Street, Lopnow's, Pollock Inn. You were
Glass
saying
Hat,
Thinner
they
Mission,
don't
Glass
have any
Hat.
parking lot,
I mean,
yeah.
the thing is, we have sidewalk cafe permits for this area down and around here, but we do not have much of anything to obstruct the street. We have Chapter 9, it's our street privilege permit that also applies. That's left to the discretion kind of the Public Works Director, but there are no parameters, restrictions, if while you're here, do you want to, I worded that agenda item so broadly, that we could decide to make temporary rules and regulations that could go forward to council, if you direct me to do it, and then you guys can talk about that at council. But I just worry, things are going to open up, and these people, they don't want to wait until next June and then the next
Well,
council.
right, and if we can handle as much of it as we can tonight and direct Tara to draft the appropriate changes so we can get them to council, then we won't take half the summer trying to approve it. We want them to be able to use it right away. We have not yet been approached by taverns per se, but I think that certainly could happen. Well, for sure, and, you have been?
Just kind of reiterating what they.
Well, And you own one, so yes, but no, I know.
I can already do it because I have a restaurant.
Right,
Can I ask one question?
sure, go ahead.
So if it's timed with July 1 when they renew their license, does that mean we can't do an event like dining in the street in June?
I think the event permit can have totally different dates. I mean, that temporary premises amendment, all of
Okay.
that event-specific stuff could
Because I'm
happen
thinking
sooner.
June 21st or the 28th, if that's the first concert. I mean, it'd be nice to do it on
Right.
the 21st before there's a concert and give them a
Right.
chance, but I didn't know if it,
We're not going to do this if there's a concert.
I think actually, after this summer, I'm hoping we always close down Third Street and every Wednesday night we dine in the street after this, beyond this. I do, and we've been talking about it.
Let's see how this
Let's get
pilot
through this
program goes
summer.
first.
Let's get through this summer, but yeah, I think we should be dining in the street.
Well, let's see, right, well, this whole thing is uncharted territory, and what I will say is that if we find that it's well-controlled and it works, and, something like that would evolve as part of our Wednesday night concert night, we'd certainly have to consider that when the time comes, but this whole arrangement has to work first. I think we need something to rely on as proof that we can manage it, and this would be a great clinical trial.
Well, and they're going to have to put in the special event application so that you can waive that liquor in the street provision that we
Right, so in the
have.
event permit, they'd need the same waiver we give exhibitor.
And we're going to still have to watch, are you going to allow on dining in the streets now, people walking off the street restaurant premise, licensed premise, going into the 400 block with their beer
Right.
and dinner, so.
Right. Well, and that waiver then essentially often then would amend the boundaries too. The boundaries always on the 400 block for Wednesday night have been curb to curb because it was an easy boundary line for people, even visitors that aren't from here, to understand easily, and it's not, but if we were to morph into some type of an event that was more, I guess, expanded, we'd really have to ask all those questions.
So, and then they're going to have to put that application in, and then we're going to have to do a quick amendment, because the waiver provision for the alcohol things say it's going to be submitted 60 days in advance, this is going to happen.
Right, we'll have to
a lot
waive
quicker
off the
than
60
that.
day,
So
yep.
I'm going to have to do a little ordinance amendment, if you can approve and motion that for me to
Yep.
shorten the application
Okay.
period for the time being.
Okay, so then, let me see if we've got this unpacked sufficiently. So then, I guess I'd be looking for a motion from the committee to direct the Assistant City Attorney to draft temporary provisions in response to this COVID-19 that shortens the event application window under that 60-day threshold, so they're not all applying late, and then that would allow an event permit to be submitted. And I imagine that would come from the River District, just like it does for many other downtown events, an event permit to be submitted to approve Wednesday night outdoor dining during specific hours. And with that event approval, the waiver would be given that we give exhibitor for alcohol in the public right-of-way, just during those confined hours. And then that temporary premises amendments would be given to the Class B license holders adjacent to the event, so that they could serve outdoors at the event. So we got three things.
I just have a question.
Okay.
My question is, are we going to allow them to walk around with alcohol? Like, this is, as I'm listening, we're going to have people from those tables want to walk to the 400 block. That's what's going to happen. And so we better think of that now before it starts happening and everybody's going,
Right.
woo.
It's happening already with exhibitor. I think we just have to look at the confined time period is the key. And so, I guess, Tyler, go ahead, you had a comment.
I was just going to say, at a lot of these sorts of things in other cities, the space that you can have the table and the alcohol in the street is just defined by the restaurant's purchase of like a portable fence or a stanchia or something that defines the space from the walkway or the emergency lane usage would be, and tells your customers where to expect those services to be
So like the
obtained.
parklet concept where they had the little seating,
Exactly. I mean,
Square.
yeah, I'm really want to, invest in those fences for that reason, but like, if I had to and it made sense to me as a business owner, I would do that. And I think it would solve the public safety issues and all the things you're talking
right?
about.
We'd have to delineate what the area is.
Correct.
I think, rather than have them just roam everywhere. I think
Yeah, you
that's.
see them taped out on the street in Madison, like where they expand and where they
Right.
retract.
Right. And it would be something that you can put up and remove easily. It's not going to be in the way when the event's out of progress. and-
Even chalk paint, I mean, something cheap, just chalk paint or whatever. I just don't want this to expand to wandering around with open intoxicants.
Every week, right,
Not
right.
every, I mean, there will be somebody pushing the boundaries, and I will definitely vote for this, but I think we have to think ahead, because
Right.
people won't understand that this is like a restaurant. It's not, this would be, if you leave that area with that open intoxicant, it's just like leaving a restaurant. That's what we have to make clear.
Same thing with the sidewalk cafe. Right now, they can't leave the
Right,
sidewalk cafe and walk
exactly.
off. This would be the similar concept.
Right,
So,
right.
okay, so if we're going to direct her to create something, it's to, A, shorten the application window, because we're already inside of the 60-day window, so they can apply on a shorter timeline than what we normally would let them. We would then allow for an event permit that would permit street closure Wednesday nights during a specific time period. And then, in connection with that event only, we would allow a temporary premises amendment to the adjacent Class B license holders to expand their premises and serve in that area during the timeline of that event. So we have those three things that would come from this action that we direct Tara to do. Go ahead, Pat.
I would make that motion, but I would hinge it on that it would occur in the 300 and 400 blocks unless there are more than one business in the 500 and 600 blocks that also want to participate.
La Prima's in the 500, Downtown Grocery and Back When are in the 600.
In that section, I think closing a street is a fairly big deal. And I wouldn't be crazy if there's only going to be one business, for example, in that 500 and 600 block stretch. I don't know if closing the street would be appropriate.
Would it be, we're a ways over from because what we're going to do is direct Tara to create these things and bring them right to the council without another stop here. Between the time she starts to draft this and the time the council gets it, River District could reach out to those other businesses. If there's interest from those businesses, you could take the other 2 blocks. But if there's not, we could confine to 300 and 400 to start with. I mean, if
That'd
it
be
works
fine,
if
yeah.
it works for the first few events, and then others decide they want to participate, we certainly could
We can
expand
go
the
there, yeah.
territory, yes. But, because I don't want to have to go through this whole process again to get 2 more blocks, if those businesses decide that they want part of that Wednesday night too, because right now, if this all wasn't happening, they all sell carryouts for the concert night, and they do well on Wednesday nights, either for dine-in and for carryout, and their sidewalk cafes are full. So I would certainly think if something's happening on Wednesday night that's not Concert on the Square,
Well-
that they may be interested too.
And let's not make an edict that, it's the whole block, because maybe, say, Way Back When wants to do it, they're conveniently located at a portion of the street. I really do worry about drawing distinctions unless they're pretty rationally related.
I like rational. I would still say, let's go with 300, 400 blocks with the option of expanding.
Okay. Okay. All right. So then Pat's motion is then to recap what we've been talking about, shorten the window, allow the event permit that closes the street, expand the premises for the adjacent premises. The street closure for now would be confined to the 300 and 400 block of 3rd Street, recognizing that tables would be placed in the parking stalls and that the travel lanes would remain open for foot traffic only and that there wouldn't be obstructions placed there. We'll certainly indicate that with the event permit. I think we've been pretty clear on that direction. And if there's interest from businesses in the 2 blocks to the north, we could certainly consider an expanded territory without subsequent committee action.
Excellent.
Is that kind of, we got the crux of it? Do we have a second for Pat's motion?
I will second it.
Second by Herbst. Further discussion or questions? Go ahead, Jim.
Does the police chief have any input?
He does. Is he on the call?
I see him.
I see him? I don't see him, but
Oh, I see his little name.
I'm here.
he's listening. Ben, can you weigh in? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, Alder Wodinski, thank you. I appreciate that. So, yeah, I think this is a good plan. I'm supportive of it. I think, I did speak with Mark Craig the other day, like you mentioned, although I will say that I think he spoke out of turn a little bit, and that I was very clear that I wouldn't speak on behalf of the fire department because I don't have the experience. So, outside of that, my role is to support the decisions of the policymakers. So, the only thing I would ask is to make sure that, that the rules and regulations are clear for officers to understand and enforce, and so that our businesses and citizens understand what's allowed, and we will enforce that. So I think it's a good plan. I'd be happy to bring my wife down there on a Wednesday night. So.
Okay. Well, and that good signage, I think, is going to be the key. Good signage and good promotions. And so if they all work together to facilitate that so people can see where the areas are and understand what's happening, because it's all new for us too. But this will be a great trial. This summer will be a good trial to see if we can expand some things on, normal Wednesday nights, post-pandemic Wednesday nights, when we might want bigger and better things too, but we'll try this first. So
I think the community is going to welcome and appreciate this.
I think so. I mean, that's the key, as I wanted to walk into this tonight with the committee trying to figure out how we can help the businesses downtown and not have the committee positioned such that we're trying to find ways to tell them they can't. We need to find ways to help, we need to find ways to assist them in coming back to life again. And I think that this is a good first step, and we've still got some good controls. There's still guardrails, but I think we've allowed them the ability to be a little more nimble and not just expect them to operate 25% indoors and no one else. So,
I just want to apologize to the chief. You did say that. I should have added that. You didn't want me to speak on behalf of the fire department. I did talk to Dave DeSantis, though. But I want to thank you all for this discussion tonight. This is an amazing discussion and a response to extraordinary times. So thank you so much for
Okay.
even the consideration.
all right. So with that, we've got a motion and a second on this directive for Tara to create this provision so that we can send it right to council. Further discussion or questions on that action? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None are opposed. That motion passes as well. Okay, the other thing that we talked about was curbside pickup and more 15-minute parking stalls so people can get in and get out close to the restaurants, and delineating those spaces closer together versus at the ends of the block where they are today. That's normally a SISM activity. SISM doesn't, or at least wasn't scheduled to have a meeting during the month of May. That doesn't mean they can't have one. We'd have to get that pulled together. But I think that we also should look at what the powers of the Public Works Director are. I think that the police chief and the Public Works Director can make temporary adjustments to parking without SISM's action. So if we wanted to adjust those parking spots and the duration of parking there, for the same length of time, say from mid-June to October 1st or whatever, I'm wondering if they can make that adjustment without a committee action. Because it's not a permanent arrangement, it's a temporary adjustment. Just like we made temporary parking adjustments for other events or for, snow emergency is a little different, but, can they make that? Tara, what do you,
Frantically looking it up.
she's frantically looking it up.
Could you talk about whether you want to do the Tavern bar obstruction street thing?
Okay.
Yes or no?
Okay, let's talk about that while Tara researches the parking. So that was the other thing that came up with our last subset of this was, do we want to allow outdoor seating for taverns if we are asked? Just like we're allowing for the restaurants to have some sidewalk tables, do you want some sidewalk tables to be managed by the taverns and their staff, just like the restaurants and their servers manage those outdoor spaces? Now, obviously, noise is a concern. Most of our taverns have neighbors. But sitting outside at a table is a little different than having a band outside. So how do we feel about that? Jim, go ahead.
I think that it may be good in some situations, may be bad. I think each establishment has to submit a proposal individually because of the location, the street, all sorts of conditions. So I don't think we can address it as a widespread yes or no. It has to be individual.
That may be something that we want to look at going forward. I mean, they all are all coming up for renewal, and if they all wish to apply for some sidewalk table seating, we could entertain that case by case, you're right, because if there's places that are, already have either issues with management or patrons versus some that have none, and some that have no neighbors versus some that have residences on every side, maybe those are considerations that we're going to have to take, because a table of adults can get pretty loud out there. So I think you're right on that, maybe. Go ahead, Pat.
I was wondering if Chief Bliven would also weigh in on the wisdom of doing the case-by-case on something like that. I also see a problem on just kind of a broad permission, little leery of that. Maybe,
Yeah, thanks,
maybe
Alder
Chief,
Peckham,
you could
for
tell
that
us,
opportunity to speak.
yeah.
What?
Just speak generally on the idea of it, and then if we were inclined to do it, if you would like us to see, handle it, consider them on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, as I'm running it through my mind just right now and haven't given a ton of thought to it, but I do think that a case-by-case approach is appropriate. There are a lot of factors at each of the establishments that we have in town as to, whether or not outside seating might or might not be a good idea. The noise is definitely one consideration. It is one of the more significant complaints we have from taverns, is the noise complaint. And I think if you have outdoor seating, you're more likely to leave your door open, which, leads to more noise complaints. And then, traffic is a concern. And so I think a cautious approach on that would be appropriate, and a case-by-case would be appropriate as well. To Chair Rasmussen's point, there are a number of establishments that we'll get to in a little bit here and talk about with the Tavern report that are having struggles maintaining their operations and not causing issues the way they currently exist. So I'm not sure we want them to operate wider premise. So I think those are some of the considerations, and I think a cautious case-by-case approach would be appropriate.
Well, that, and I think also for control of the area. I mean, if they have an outdoor area, they need to maintain control of it and make sure people aren't walking off with beverage. And most of our participants that we're talking about with the restaurant scenario already have sidewalk cafes and are already used to controlling a confined area outside and providing a server to manage it. And so this is all new, though, for taverns. They've never had it before, with the exception of an event or two. And so I think that case-by-case and baby steps might be prudent. Go ahead, Tara.
Whenever you're going to regulate someone like that, you apply your case-by-case decision against a set standard of criteria when you're going to award or not award something. So you can't just have somebody come in willy-nilly, 5 different applications with no standards to measure that against as to when you're going to allow that person to have that seating outside or not. Does that make sense?
So we should create that
Well,
criteria.
that's what I'm saying. Case by case, they apply, and you look at your criteria and you say yes or no, you don't meet our criteria. But we can't have, you come in this week and we'll look at you without, they have a right to be able to look and get an idea if they're in the ballpark of whether they're going to be approved or not. So, you can't just take them one at a time and say, well, we think you're too noisy and you're not too noisy.
No, but if we had, let's say we created criteria where we look at first space. Is there adequate space available to create such an area with the appropriate distancing and keep it safe from neighbors, sidewalk traffic, and vehicles? If there's not sufficient space for them to have it in the first place, that's one criteria. Some establishments have, we just approved one for Whitewater tonight, a very large outdoor area because their south parking lot's conducive to an area like that. Not every place has that, though. The other thing that we would want to look at is proximity to neighbors and, where the establishment is situated. If they're in a business district where there are no residential neighbors that are trying to sleep at 10 o'clock at night, that's totally different than one that's surrounded by homes. I think we'd want to look at that criteria. And the other thing that we'd want to look at is call history or demerit point history. And like the chief mentioned, there's at least 4 establishments that we're going to see next month that have struggles existing in their current capacity, let alone add more things for them to keep control of. So, those 3 things are the 3 big ones that I can think of, and there's probably, you guys would probably come up with 3 more, but, that's something that if we're going to consider it case by case, we should also articulate what that decision matrix looks like for us. So do we want to, maybe we could hold off for now on making any decision about taverns. We know they'll ask. But for the next meeting, maybe Tara could draft us a sample that we could look at for June? Could you draft us a sample for June? Okay.
And it'll only be for this emergency period.
Right. And I would see similar, we have a set of criteria that we use to consider Class B licenses in general, that the Liquor License Review Subcommittee uses. And we look at, and that's a longer list, but we look at zoning and we look at proximity to houses and schools and we look at the history, we look at management experience. There's a whole list of things that committee uses, and there may be, the 3 things I mentioned are probably on that list, and there might be a couple others that are on that list of decision-making factors that we may want to also look at, in connection with that. So if Tara can draft us something to look at next time, that'll at least give us a kind of a roadmap. If we're good with that, we won't decide on taverns tonight then. Are we good? Are we good on that?
Makes
Wait a little
sense,
bit?
yes.
Okay, all right, so we'll wait on that. Tara, did you find anything out about that parking?
I believe it has to be SISM. It does not have to go to council, but when we all revised all our ordinances combining SISM and parking and traffic, we said it was going to be SISM that passed those temporary regulations, and that's why I believe SISM passed the resolution about the valet parking.
Oh, yes, okay. So maybe what we need then, because if we wait until the 2nd Thursday of June for the next CISM meeting, that's going to be problematic. I think to expedite the process, we should request that CISM have a special meeting, select their chairman and vice chairman, because they haven't yet, and have one additional item, and it would be this parking business for these 15-minute stalls. If we could request that. They don't have a chairman yet, but if we can get with Public Works Director Lindman and have something set up and have that committee try to meet as soon as it can. Because we don't want to add 3 more weeks to the process. With the stuff that we have to draft, now did we cover all of it? Because the 15-minute parking stalls, we removed the bollards. We've dealt with the 3rd Street event closure, sidewalk cafe expansions, we got that done. I think that covers everything in Mr. Craig's memo. I don't see anything that we've not addressed. As this gets rolling, we may find a couple things that we either haven't or we still want to, but I don't know, do we have it unpacked well enough that we can at least have a start? Okay. All right, and Tara, with the draft that you have to make, because you've already referenced all the ordinances that are effective that need some tweak, when do you suspect that you could have that? Could you get it to the next council meeting for the end of May?
Yeah, it's important. When is the next?
It's the 4th Tuesday.
The 26th.
There, thank you. Someone has a calendar.
I
Okay,
don't.
May 26th?
Is that a week from tomorrow?
Yes. It's a week from tomorrow. It's the first day after Memorial Day. Okay. So that would be expeditious, because then we could,
When's the agenda have to go out, Mary?
6 days before that.
Well, when is that? That's like tomorrow.
okay, so here's the thing. For
Yeah.
good cause, we can still waive off the 6-day rule. And I know that we have some folks that hate when we do that, but this is,
We're just going to
it's,
have to.
we're going to have to waive off the 6-day rule. And so between the mayor and the council president, if they're okay with waiving the 6-day rule, understanding that this is all fluid,
I'm okay with it. You're just going to have to vote on suspending the rules.
I will always vote for that.
I'll
So,
have it ready by Friday, but it's not going to be ready tomorrow.
it's difficult to, I mean, to comply with that. We would be already into the first meeting of June, and we're eating up the season that people are trying to use. So I think sooner is better than later. So if we could make our decision by the end of May, then the rollout of all that, and the businesses are going to have to tool up also to prepare for it and figure out where to go and how to staff it and how to equip it. Maybe they need to order tables and chairs too. I think the sooner we can all get going on that, the better. So, okay, so with that, we'll then have items for the council to approve then next Tuesday. And that comes with another request. Mary, can we expedite the minutes of this meeting for those packets, please? At least this section. At least this section, because I think that the members of the council that aren't here, that aren't on this committee and don't view it online are going to be confused if they don't have at least a.
To anybody that's watching, any other council members, you are encouraged to go back and look at the video, and also you can call me.
Okay.
And I will talk you through this entire situation if you feel uncomfortable.
Thank God you're here. And yes, I would do the same. If anybody has questions to know how we got to this point, because it's a lot to unpack, but I wanted to make sure we got as much done tonight as we could possibly get, because taking 3 meetings to get this accomplished defeats its purpose. Okay, so I think that gets us through item 6. That moves us on to item number 7, which is discussion and possible action on amending section 5.04.030, investigation of certain applicants. And you'll recall a couple meetings ago, we had talked about delegating our authority to issue licenses to people who come back from a check that are not recommended for denial, that we would then allow the staff to issue those licenses with the chief's recommendation to approve, and we would not have them have to wait for a committee and council meeting to get that license. However, all the ones that are recommended for denial, we would still get, because they get the right to come and appeal and tell us a story. So we'd still see those, but we wouldn't have all the ones that are, which 90% of them in the batch every month are qualified anyway, and they just get approved, but they're left waiting and they can't start work until. So, in there, you have the amendments that we directed Tara to make. I believe that was at was that at the March meeting or the February meeting? It's been so long. And so you've got that in the packets, which basically assigns that authority to the staff and takes it away from the committee and the council. Go ahead, Tara.
It's actually even a little more complicated than that, because at public health, and I tried to explain it in the comments, at public health and safety, you agreed to give Mary that authority, or not Mary,
Yes.
but Mary and Leslie that
Yep.
authority. So when I went back to make the ordinance changes, I realized our ordinance is so old and goofed up, that's the legal term, that we actually already had given the clerks that authority on those licenses
That were
back
not
in the
denied.
60s. And they had the authorities to issue Class B and Class A liquor licenses. So this ordinance, what it does is leaves in place the authority that was already there for Leslie and Mary to approve operators' licenses,
Yes.
but takes away the authority
For the
them
establishments.
to issue the establishments,
we
because
we
that's
wanna see the
contrary to
establishments.
state law. You can't
State
even
law
do
and our
that.
common practice has been that we want to see all of those.
So it's really more about fixing the old errors. And
Okay.
maybe it was okay back then.
So this gets where we want to go and fixes what's old and shouldn't have been in place in the first place. So, committee members, any questions for Tara on that? If not, is there a motion to approve?
I would make that motion, it looks great.
Second that motion.
Okay, motion by Peckham, second by Wadinsky. Further discussion or questions? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye. Aye, opposed? None are opposed, that motion carries also. Item number 8 is the operations report from the fire department for April of 2020, and you've got copies of that report in the packets. Does anybody have questions for Deputy Chief Bartek on the report, or anything notable on the report that you want to talk about?
Normally, we're here saying how it's been an average month or whatever the previous, but April was anything but average for us. You'll see a significant decrease in our total call volume. We were actually in the mid 300s when we were normally Actually, we were 361, I think, total, and normally we're at least 100 calls heavier than that in the month, and so, a little between 20 and 25% decrease in call volume. We do believe that's directly correlated to the COVID-19 and the stay-at-home orders and everything like that was going on. One significant fire on 56th Avenue was confined by a strong stop by Station 2. The Engine 2 will make a quick arrival on that scene and held it to the garage, and most likely that structure will be rebuilt. All the contents in the interior of the house were saved, the contents in the garage were lost. Other than that, I've got no comments, but open to
Anybody
questions.
have questions on the report? If not, we'll place the report on file. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 9 is tavern activities, compliance checks, and law enforcement activities, and you've got that report in your packets. As the police chief referenced, there's some pretty interesting reading contained within the report again this month. Chief, do you want to talk about the report briefly and the things of note that you've observed on there as well?
Yeah, sure can. First, the good news, Cop Shop Hub is now down to 0 demerit points because they've gone 12 months without violations, so their demerit points have dropped off, so that's a good thing. I feel like I've talked about this already, but I'm just going to mention it again because it's in the current report. So Hutch's Bar, they had a violation back in January where they were issued 25 demerit points. And then in March, they had an incident where they refused to cooperate. They were open after hours. And so we issued 75 demerit points, which brings them up to 100. And then Nucha's Eatery in March had a large event at their bar, and they were way over capacity, and it took them a long time to clear it out. There were a lot of concerns about being over the capacity issue, and so they were issued 75 demerit points for that. They're now up to 125 demerit points. I talked about their other violation a few months ago. So that brings us to 4 establishments, I think, that are at or over 100 demerit points now. That probably need to be called in to talk to by the committee.
Right, and so we're planning to make those invitations for our June meeting. That said, I guess I have some concerns with the management response on behalf of Nucha's Eatery. When he was running a restaurant over on Fulton Street, that was a totally different situation over there than when he moved into the former Chapter 2. And somewhere along the line, is there a tavern entertainment permit in place out there or a dance hall permit in place out there? Because if they're having a DJ and they've got 300 people in there, somewhere he has it in his mind that he's changed from restaurant to dance club, and that's a problem. That you can't have 300 people in that place.
Yeah, I mean, to read the report and to hear the officers talk about their experience that night, I mean, there were a lot of traffic issues. There were people, extremely intoxicated that were outside urinating. I think there was one vomiting, and just a total lack of control in the establishment. So, yeah, a lot of concerns. I mean, I've met with him a couple of times. He appears to be very willing to abide by the rules and regulations and talk about how we can help him make sure he's within compliance and doing things in a good and legal way. But then now this has happened since my most recent meeting with him, and so I'm not quite sure what to make of it. I mean, he was somewhat cooperative, but really delayed clearing the establishment out once the officers decided that he needed to take action. So,
Well, and if he knew that his posted capacity was 99 people and then proceeded to sell in excess of 240 wristbands and continue to admit people to the building even though the building was at double or more its normal capacity, I mean, I guess I have some serious concerns about that. And I'm glad that we're inviting him in June because I think the committee needs to have a dialogue with him about what type of business he actually intends to be versus what he's licensed for. I mean, that's dangerous.
and I think that's a great point in terms of the capacity. It's not like he was 3 or 4 or even 20 people over capacity. Officers estimated there to be 300 people in the bar. He admits to selling 240 wristbands when the capacity is 99. So he's officers' estimates put it at triple capacity, which is obviously a major concern.
Well, that's just it. If someone had a medical event in that crowd, you'd never know. I mean, That person couldn't even, there was not even room for someone to fall down. So we
I mean,
need,
it-
we
you know, and then
definitely
there's
need to talk to
obviously
him.
Concerns about, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I mean, then there's obvious concerns about maintaining control on the underage drinking and the over-serving and all of those issues that go in.
Right, no, I totally agree. He did not have a ton of experience when he got that place, and that's one thing that we've experienced consistently with inexperienced tavern owners, is they have to learn the right way, but they have to be cooperative with learning the right way also. I mean, we had that same trouble with Clubhouse. That owner didn't have experience either, and then what he was afraid of took over, and now he's not in business anymore. So I think if we can have a positive discussion with all four of these owners about where they're at with demerits, but we'll be looking for some substantial improvement from them, assuming that they renew in July. The committee is certainly no stranger to suspensions to elicit improvements in behavior and management, and when that doesn't work, it's the next step. So we'll invite all of those owners. The clerk's office will need to send letters to them all again, let them know that the committee has some serious concerns about what's been happening, and we'll have them in for our June meeting then. Does anybody else have questions on items on the report for the chief? If not, we'll place that report on file as well. Item number 10 is discussion and possible action to extend expired Executive Declaration Number 3, suspending Wausau Municipal Code 5.64.036 to permit carryout sales of alcoholic beverages in original sealed containers. This was the provision that Mayor Milky had allowed at the end of his term for licensed establishments to sell sealed, closed containers retail for curbside collection. And this would extend that then a little bit longer. I know places have been using it. It's one more way that they can conduct some commerce now under the circumstances. I think that's something that we certainly don't want permanently. We had enacted the ordinance in the first place to address click and collect alcohol, which was starting to permeate the state. It started with Applebee's, but now a number of retailers have adopted it too. But this does allow a temporary lift on that to help businesses kind of get back on their feet. Does anyone have questions on this at all? If not, is there a motion then to approve the extension?
I'll make that motion, but how are we going to word it? Will it have a sunset, or will it be,
There's a sample of it in the packet, I think, at the end, wasn't there?
If you include that in your motion, it would maybe through end of September or something?
Oh, it wasn't in there. I thought we had an extension provision in the packet. Okay, so yes, in your motion to approve, you could insert a sunset date. So if you wanted to go to 10/1 or 10/31 or whatever, you could set a finite end, and if we needed further extension, we could consider it here, and if things are rolling along and not going too badly, maybe we want to let it sunset itself then. Would you like to insert a date in your approval?
Yeah, I think if we don't, it might get spicy that, it's hard to pull it back once we put it out there as a normal, without some kind of sunset, because that's how the first one ended.
Right.
It was tied to the public health declaration.
Yep.
So, what do people think? Do you think we should go 10/1, 10/31? I don't, does anybody have, I don't really know. I could go. How long are we doing the other ones? The on-street dining?
Just for this season?
Yeah,
For
but
the season, 10/31 was what we left off on those.
Let's just make it even 10/31 then.
Okay.
I will make a motion to reauthorize this ordinance through, with a sunset date of 10/31/2020.
Okay. Is there a second to Becky's motion?
Yes.
Okay, second from Peckham. Further discussion or questions?
I have a comment.
Go ahead, Dawn.
Refresh my memory. Wasn't Applebee's at the time the only ones? Did we turn them down?
We did, and actually, they withdrew they were going to apply, and then there was some flood activity that kept their people from attending the meeting, so we waited a month and we didn't make a decision for the Milwaukee folks that were going to travel up to visit with us. And in the meantime, we ratified this drive-up sales prohibition, and they withdrew their or they just didn't come. They didn't pursue it because they knew that this ordinance would preclude it. They were only trying it in a few select cities that were willing to allow it. We adopted this, as did a number of other Wisconsin cities. Separate from that, though, shortly thereafter, Click and Collect started to expand. Walmart's got it. A lot of the grocery stores now have it. This, though, allows them to allow curbside pickup of those items. It started at Applebee's with wine. They were going to carry wine out and hand it to someone through a car window, and we were concerned about the optics of handing a bottle of wine to a driver and having them drive off. Since then, Merrill has developed a drive-through liquor store and car wash combination. It's interesting. So, I mean, it's a Wausau thing, but we were concerned about the optics of handing an alcoholic beverage through a car window to a driver and them having it at arm's length and taking off and going with it. And so this, though, does give some temporary relief on that for retail sale. Go ahead.
I would like the chief's comment on this.
Go ahead, Ben.
Thanks, Ms. Herbst. I still feel like I did when we first discussed this about Applebee's and Milwaukee Burger, and that is that I don't like the optics. I think there's a potential for, more open intoxicants and drinking and driving and those kinds of things. With that being said, I think, it's an interesting time right now, and so if there's a way to try and support business and let some of these establishments make sure that they can stay afloat for this temporary time, I can understand why a policy decision like that would be made.
But most of these places have have liquor in their stores. Why do you need to drive up? Just go in the store.
I think they were wanting to add it to a curbside order, like your curbside grocery pickup order.
Okay.
And so then you would be able to get beer or wine or whatever with your groceries, and they could deliver it all to your vehicle, like your Triggs to Go type.
This is a little bit different because the original order still required the face-to-face sale. So the people were going to come up to the door, or the vendor was going to come to the car and actually make the sale and still
check the ID and make sure the person wasn't impaired.
The ticket is more of a, put a six-pack in my grocery order and then off I go. At least that's how I understood it. So we're still supposed to have the face-to-face sale with the checking of the ID for this. And in some ways, it may not even encompass the click it or ticket, but I thought, well, there's some ambiguity between what is click it or ticket and what the governor had originally authorized this under his orders, that we were supposed to allow these sales, to allow them to just sell to go, but we had the face-to-face.
The nuance of his order was to avoid contact, like contactless sale, in the interest of health safety.
Couldn't go in the store.
Right, because you couldn't go in the store, and, now you still have people who won't want to. But, if we are still I think if we still have the provision for the face-to-face activity, that does allow the person that's delivering the product to assess the person that's getting the product. Are you going to give it to an 18-year-old driver of a vehicle and they go with it? Or, this at least requires that they check the person that's picking up the item and make sure that they're not either already impaired or has been consuming, or that they're not of legal age to possess the item. So, we do have some safety net there with that versus allowing them to just put it in a, grocery sack and off they go, and, whoever the pickup person is, they are. That's what I see with a lot of click and collect, is the pickup person can be different than the person that made the purchase. Because those applications allow you to designate a different pickup person. And so, and under those circumstances, if you want to make a purchase from one of those stores and send your kid to pick it up, you can do that. But under this allowance, that would not be an option, because they'd still have to check that person. So are we still comfortable with continuing that practice, or do we want to let that go? This would give us an extension, we'd allow it a little longer.
I think we should go ahead with the motion as it is made, but just speaking for myself, I probably after October 31st, I'm going to be through with this.
I feel like I will be too, I mean, just as one voting member, because I think we want to allow it for a little bit, but if it keeps getting renewed in perpetuity, then the purpose of the original restriction is lost.
Yeah.
So,
So I think that's a pretty hard deadline for me.
okay, so, yes, so a motion, we have a motion and a second to approve, recognizing that the committee seems resigned to the fact that this may be the last extension. Any further discussion or questions? If not, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Okay, we'll show no one opposed, and that motion also will carry. Item 11 is communications. I have none. Does anyone else have anything to communicate?
Can I share something with the chief? This is
Certainly.
off the record.
Certainly.
We're talking about intoxicants. My mother owned grocery stores many years ago and did not have liquor departments. And my mother's voice and mine sounded very much the same. So I proceeded to call the liquor store to request on my mother's behalf a case of beer that I would be sending my daughter to pick up. Oh, and let me tell you, she found out. And when she found out, when you talk about a child being put across your knee, I was 16, and this better not be on record.
Well, you're on, yeah, you are, because we have adjourned.
No, I have to finish. Anyhow, she took my pants down over her knee and paddled my behind, and I'm telling you, I deserved every bit of those.
Oh, cheapers.
I was her devil daughter.
Oh, geez. Okay, I'm afraid to ask, do we have any additional communications?
And she grew up to be on the public health and safety.
And she did, and now, this is the woman who helps us with our alcohol regulations. No.
With that note, I know we adjourn.
We got a motion from Peckham to adjourn, is there a second?
I will second it.
Second by Herbst. Members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? None are opposed, we'll stand adjourned. Thanks, everyone.
Better not be put back in my-